You're about to hear an amazing story. My guest today is Wendy Taylor, and on January 20th, 2007, her husband was killed. This show is about not just his death and not just the book that came from his death, but how miracles took place in her life before and after, how our Blessed Virgin actually was preparing her for that day, and she didn't even realize it. So you're going to be very excited, as am I, to hear her story today. So Wendy Taylor's book is called Undefeated, a War Widow's Story of Faith and Survival. Wendy, thank you so much for
Oh,
sharing this story, writing it down, and then for letting my viewers
I'm
get to
so
know you.
happy to be here. Very
Ah,
happy.
so can we just start at the beginning? Can you tell us a little bit about your life and marriage before that fateful day in January of '07?
We met in high school. We met when we were 17 years old and basically grew up together, graduated together, and married at the tender age of 19 years old. We were married for 20 years. We, like I said, basically grew up together, and we had two children, Justin and Meredith. Justin is now 28 years old, and my daughter Meredith will be 23. We both lived in Little Rock, Arkansas, and we were soulmates and best friends. And he volunteered to go to Iraq in 2006. The training started, I would say, about 6 months out before boots on the ground in Iraq. And I told him we would be waiting for him, and we supported him. We understood why I was going. And he was there not very long until he got there in September of 2006, and then was killed in action on January 2007, January 20th of 2007.
So he wasn't even there a year.
Not at all.
What
It
was
was supposed
his?
to be an eight. Go ahead, sorry.
No, you go.
He was a pilot for the Army. He flew Blackhawks. And basically, they had been being watched. They didn't know that they were being watched on their routes daily. And that day, the insurgents decided to attack. And he was the, sorry, he was the second aircraft in line, and they shot an RPG at his aircraft. And so it crashed, and I was notified the next day. There were 12 passengers total, and all perished. So it was devastating.
I think about the movie Black Hawk Down, and I don't know if that movie came in before or after your
It
husband's
was
passing.
before. It was before. Yeah.
So that makes it this next question. Did you feel like your husband was safe? Like, well, you're in a helicopter, you're not down on the ground. I'm less concerned than if you had been a boot on the ground, or were you always a little like, this is risky?
I felt like it was risky. I knew things were really dangerous over there. I don't think he and I realized how dangerous it was until he got over there. And of course, he couldn't tell me anything, but I could just tell by the look in his eyes. Um, when he would, it wasn't
Zoom.
called Zoom then. I don't know if it was called Zoom back then.
Whatever it was, yeah, the
Whatever it
camera.
was back then. But I could tell he wanted to talk to me desperately, but he couldn't because it wasn't safe. Um, and honestly, and I have shared this with many, 4 days prior to him passing, I became very restless that night. The kids had already gone to bed, and I was just kind of pacing in the kitchen. I just felt like something was wrong. And I just kept having visions and flashes of him being in an accident. And I could see everything, and it just wouldn't leave me alone. And I was praying and discerning. I called some friends of mine and said, can you please meet me up at the Adoration Chapel tonight? I really need some prayers, and maybe you guys can help me figure out what's going on. And no one really received anything except me. So I went back home, and the next day I was able to get a hold of Michael. And I said, please be careful. I had some visions in my head of an accident. And he said, no, no, everything's fine. Everything will be fine. And I said, just please, please be careful. I just don't feel good about something's not feeling right. And then 4 days after, he was killed in action. So I was glad that I said something to him that made me feel better. I think I would have beat myself up if I hadn't said anything. It didn't, prevent it. But
But was your
that,
husband a man of faith? Because
yes,
if saying something, maybe it made him pray more. Maybe it asked him to call down angels.
yes. And
What
I remember
was,
talking to
go
my
ahead.
priest about it. And I said, I just felt like that maybe the angels took him before he felt pain. And I think that that's probably what did happen. Um, Before he felt any pain, hopefully they took him.
Yeah. Do you know anything about the company he was in, or the battalion, or what? Was there a priest there? Do you think that they received the sacraments regularly on occasion? Do you know if he had had a chance to go to mass or maybe even confession at some point?
I didn't know, he didn't mention that because he was the commander at the time. So I didn't get to talk to him as much because he was so extremely busy. And he was doing a lot of the flying, and they were really overworking them at that time, flying more hours than they were supposed to be flying. So I really didn't get to talk to him as much as I wanted to. Um, but the priest, Father West, here back at home at that time was very helpful, and we did a beautiful funeral for him at our church. And um, but I do know that evil was at work that day, and uh,
Which
it took
day? The day of his death or the day of the
January
funeral?
20th. And I talked to Father West about it, and um, just I knew that God would get me through it. Um, I didn't know how, but I knew He would. I knew He would get me through it. I always tell everybody the hardest part was telling my children. And I thought after all of this, after keeping the home fires burning and all the times that he wasn't home and everything, and trying to keep everything going, the hardest part of all of this was telling my children.
Yeah.
And that was really tough. That was really, really tough. But I know that I knew that I needed to be the one to tell them. And I just remember getting down on my knees and saying, God, how much more do I have to do? And and they just wailed, and it was horrific. And I think uh, when something like that happens, at least for me, um, the old Wendy was gone. I think Michael took that Wendy with him, and I was just a shell. And I think that's how God was able to reach me so well, because there was nothing in His way. Nothing. I was stripped of everything. And I can't explain how that feels mentally or physically, but I know that's what happened. And He was able to get a hold of me. And I surrendered. And I always say I thought I knew what surrendering meant, but I didn't until that day. I did not, because I had nothing but God. I had nothing but Him. And I remember saying to Him, God, I give you my children. I give you my finances. I give you my home. I give you my life. I give you everything. And he picked me up and carried me for quite a while. And during that time, there were some very precious miracles that happened to me um, when I was grieving in bed and crying. And one night, I think it was the second night that I was in bed, just crying myself to sleep. And I've never cried like that before in my life. And all of a sudden I felt this warm hand on my back, and there was no one in my bedroom at all at that time. And I just knew right away it was God. It was just it was a knowing in I just stopped crying immediately and had peace and was able to shut my eyes and go to sleep for a little bit. And when Michael finally got to us, his body was brought to us. Um, I went to see him in the funeral home the night before the rosary, and I did ask several of the soldiers if they could stay at the funeral home with him overnight. I didn't want him to be by himself. So they guarded him all night in the funeral home. And so about 10 o'clock that night before the rosary, I called Father West and I said, Father, can you come get me? Because we lived 5 minutes from the church. Father, can you come get me so I can be with him one more time before tomorrow? And he said, of course. So we went up there and I said, I'd really like to be in here by myself if that's okay. And they were a little hesitant because they didn't want me to open the casket or anything like that. And later I found that they had already actually turned it around, flipped it around so that I wouldn't be able to. But they allowed me to do that. And I was in there by myself, and all of a sudden I felt the whole room as if it were consumed with God. It was just consumed. I was breathing it. I just felt consumed. And I felt this huge sense of peace and huge sense of understanding that why are we all so stressed and anxiety ridden, and why are we so upset and worried, and God is so powerful. God is so big. He can do
He's got
anything.
this. Yeah.
He's got it. He's so huge. And I just felt, I can't explain it anymore. There's no English words to explain. Um, and I thought it had only been about maybe 30 minutes. And Father comes in to get me. And I said, oh, is it time to go? And he said, it's been 3 hours. So I had been in there for 3 hours, not even realizing it, when I thought it had just been a few minutes. And I will never forget that feeling ever in my life.
What a gift.
I will never ever, and you know what? I always say, if I could share that feeling with every person, this world would be different. It would be completely different because I felt like I was blessed with, I felt like I was allowed just to kind of dip my toe in heaven just a little bit. And it was so consuming and so beautiful and so wonderful. And I thought if everyone could feel that, this world would be so much different than it is now.
Yeah.
And so later, we had to wait a bit for Michael's body to come in. So it was a few days after this, and I'd heard about the fire and everything, how the Blackhawk had burned up and everything. And I got down, I was up in my bedroom again by myself. That's where I went because my home was full of people and family all the time. And thank goodness. And I'd gone up there for some quiet, and I got down on my knees and I said, God, I just want his wedding band. Can I just please have his wedding band? And God whispered in my ear, you'll have it. And so I shared that with people in the house, and I could tell that they
Didn't think it would
didn't
happen.
believe me, but they didn't say, I don't believe you. They just said, oh, that's not, I could tell what was
Yep.
going on. And
What
I
are you going
said,
to say to a grieving widow?
exactly.
Right?
And I could tell, and I was like, no, you don't understand. He told me I would, so I would. I know what it looks like, but it doesn't matter. And so I called a casualty officer, and I said, can you please get a hold of the people investigating the aircraft, because God said I would have his ring, and I need to know if they find a wedding band. And he's like, they're not gonna find anything. Everything's completely burned up. There's nothing left. And he said I would have it. I need for them to let me know if they find something. Well, and I told him inscription on the inside and everything. And a month later, I got a call, and my casualty officer said, I have something to bring to you. And it was in a little purple pouch, and it was his wedding band. And it was the only one out of all 12 passengers on that aircraft that survived.
Wow.
And it had a little bit of the smoke and, fire stuff on it. They tried to get as much off as they could, but there were several married people on that aircraft, and that was the only ring that, and I said, I told you. And so I always share this story that God is real, and he still performs miracles. And he gave that to me. He heard me and he gave that to me. And so those things do happen. They do.
Gift.
Yes,
What a gift.
they
And
do.
now, before you talk about the miracles and things, I just kind of want to wallow in this season for a little bit. And if you want to come out of the season, because it's a heavy place. I think I told you that I had the privilege of being with someone when her son was killed, and I got to go to Dover and watch the great respect with which they bring back our precious men and women. And anyway, so one of the things I knew was that because of my training, I worked at the Fleet and Family Support Centers with our military for over a decade, was that you're in a cloud. You're in a fuzzy brain. You're not thinking clearly. And this is true of any grief. Don't make big decisions in the next 6 months or so. And there comes to be a point where you come out of your cloud in so much of a way that you look back and realize you were in a cloud.
Yes.
How long does that take, and how did you get through that cloud? And then how did you know, like, I'm out? I mean, you're never out of the grief,
Right.
but the cloud kind of lifts and you can think clearly again.
Right.
Can you speak about that season?
Yeah, I can say that I felt it physically too. I would tell people it felt like somebody was hitting me with a bat. I just felt the pain in my chest and all over my body for about 2 solid years, I would say.
Mhm.
Um, uh, I remember the kids had gone to school and I was washing clothes and stuff. And sometimes I would wash his clothes again just to feel like I was doing something for him. I think it was part of me healing. So I would rewash his clothes and put them back in his drawer and things like that. And I remember one time I was walking up the stairs with a basket full of clothes, and it just hit me so hard in the chest, and I fell down on the ground and just kind of leaned up against the wall in the hallway and said, God, please, when is this going to stop? Please take the pain away. Please take this pain away. And that went on for a while, quite a while. But every morning I would wake up and during this fog, and I would say, okay, let's get up. Let's put our feet on the ground. Let's take a shower. Let's get dressed. And I guess basically what got it through me were my kids. I was fighting for not only myself, but my kids. I wanted them to be okay. And I knew that I was the only parent they had now. Also, I wanted to make Michael proud of me. And I knew that God would get me through this. It was not going to be easy. He never promised that, but that I would get through it. And so I just would talk to myself every single morning, get up and do this, and just talk to myself mentally, continue to go to mass, continue praying, continue going to adoration, talking to God every day, talking to the Blessed Mother every day, just doing small things around the house, always saying, oh, Blessed Mother, help me. And there were times when I felt like they were standing right there next to me, but that's what got me through it was prayer and God and listening with my heart, because you can have so many family and friends around you during that time, but honestly, only God can get you through that. And I sat in his lap for a very long time until until I learned to walk again. That's how I put it.
How did you know when you were out? How did you know you were walking again? Did you
I,
laugh again? Did you smile
yes,
again? I mean, what was it that you're like,
I-
the cloud is gone?
right. It wasn't completely gone, but it was partially gone. And what I realized something was a little different was I had gone to a church event and there was a priest playing a guitar and telling silly jokes and stuff. And this was about 2 years after. And I laughed a little bit and I went, oh, and it caught me off guard. It caught me off guard because I hadn't laughed in that long. And then I felt
Wow.
guilty.
Of
I felt
course.
guilty. But then I thought, oh, something's a little different. So it doesn't go away all of a sudden. It's just like little baby steps. This clouds just slowly start going away. But that was the very first time that I knew that maybe I am coming out of this. Yeah, a
Yeah.
little bit. Sure.
So the book is called Undefeated, so here you are, this war widow, and it said faith and survival. And so far, that's what you've been talking about. You just needed to survive. And the only thing that got you through was your faith. I need to survive. I need the faith. You had mentioned, though, that God was preparing you 2 years in advance, and you had no clue until years later when you looked back and reread your diaries. Do you mind sharing that with us?
So 2 years prior, I was already going to church and everything, but I felt God kind of tugging me. And I don't even know if I realized that was what was going on. I just was kind of like on autopilot kind of thing. And I started going to daily mass. I started going to a prayer group. I started doing the rosary more, just being closer to God, being more involved in the church and just making him the center of my life. And it was just, and then during that time, I started feeling the Blessed Mother talk to my heart. And something that was very interesting was that every time I would feel as if she wanted to speak to my heart, the kids were always upstairs. They never came downstairs. The phone never rang. No one ever knocked on the door. No one ever walked through the room. And I would just feel her presence, and I started kneeling down and just jotting as fast as I could in a journal that I still have. And when I would write, I would read it and go, I don't understand what this means. I don't know what this means. Because it would say things about many tears and many people at your door and things like this. And I thought, gosh, what is this? What is this? And so I would just obediently write. Every time I would feel her presence, I would just kneel down quickly in front of the coffee table, down on my knees, grab my pen and just start. It's like I couldn't keep up. And then after he passed and I was out of the fog and could remember that I had written all those things, I started going through the pages, and she's telling me that there will be many tears, much grieving, many people will come to the door, much heartache, just without going into a lot of detail, just told me what was going to happen. And when I read that, I went, wow, that she blessed me with that. I was hearing her, and now I know what she was trying to tell me. She was preparing me. And so after he passed, I even remember something that some of us can't even fathom saying out loud. We hold on to the ones that we love with this big kung fu grip of ours. We don't want to let go. It's the only way I know how to explain it. And I remember one evening after he passed, I remember praying to her and going, just kind of letting go of him and saying, Blessed Mother, I hand him over to you. Please take good care of him for me. And I kind of surprised myself after I said it, because I thought, God, I can't believe I just said that. Like, I would have never imagined myself saying anything like that before. So when these things happen, these horrendous traumatic events in our life, the suffering can really be used to get closer to God, and such beautiful things can happen from that suffering, which at the time you don't see that. But I would like to think that I'm a better person, that I see things in a simpler perspective, what's really important. Because when someone that close to you passes in such a horrendous way, you think about the small things. You think about the coffee that you had together every morning, the little phrases that they would say to you, over dinner, the smile that they had, the twinkle in their eye, the way they comb their hair, little things like that are really precious. It's not the big things at all. And so there were a lot of gifts that I got out of the suffering that I still get today. I think it made me more empathetic. I think people can be sympathetic, but not completely empathetic. But now I feel people's pain more intensely. There's an understanding and there's a knowing. that you get from that. So I'm very thankful for that. Yes, it was horrible and it was extremely hard to get through, especially with 2 grieving children. It's extremely hard to get through that. But God got me through that and I learned a lot, and hopefully makes me better prepared for heaven, to be able to go to heaven. So,
And none of this even talks about, I mean, I was going to go to a more deep and spiritual question, but before I do that,
yeah.
the idea of, I mean, your husband's a commanding officer. So the news is all over. You get 12
Oh my
guys die at one
goodness.
time. They
Yes.
all act like they have sympathy, but they need a story. And I watched that happen with my friend as well. And I was kind of like, I had to be the
Yes.
barrier, the
Yeah.
gatekeeper. How did you
That was
navigate
bad.
that? I was just going to say, did our mother
That was
help?
bad. Um, we
You
got
don't have to go
bombarded.
there if it's a place like, I don't want to talk bad about
Yeah.
people.
We got bombarded. We got bombarded with news people. I mean, the day that I found out the ring was, I don't know how people find out so quickly. Not the day up, but the next day my phone was ringing off the wall and for TV interviews, and it shocked me. So I thought, why would I want to do that right now? I don't want to, the last thing I want to do is leave my home. The last thing I want to do is talk to a stranger.
Put makeup on.
Put makeup on, which I didn't do for a very long time, by the way.
Right. I don't want to get out of
And I
bed.
don't want to do that. I don't want to talk to anybody. And it really woke me up to how people can be so insensitive when they have not been through that themselves.
Yeah.
So the phone was ringing off the wall. Um, Newsweek at that time, People magazine. And then since I wouldn't answer the door and I wouldn't give an interview, then we hear a news helicopter or something going over the house. So they're going to get pictures any way that they can at the most tragic moment in your life. And I just felt so, it made it worse, to be honest. It made it worse. And during the funeral, they wanted inside of the church, and I said, no, that's very private. Well, where can we stand? So all the news people, we had them stand so many feet outside of the church behind, next to this Mary statue. And then I didn't want pictures of us or the kids at all, floating around during the worst time of our life. And so the Patriot Guard,
I love the Patriot
God love
Guard.
them, God love them, came up and made a wall of themselves and flags. And so when we came out of the church, no one could see us as we got in limousines. But unfortunately, on the other side of the road from the church, there were protesters
That's why the Patriot
yelling
Guard
at
shows
us.
up to try to
Yeah,
blunt. That's evil. They will have
it
to answer to
yelling at
God for
us,
that.
telling us we deserved what happened to us, all of this stuff. And then they, I guess they found out that those protesters were going to follow us also to the gravesite. So the Patriot Guard had to follow us and then protect the entrance and not let them in. I can't even imagine how that would have affected my children if that had occurred.
They will have to answer
That
to
was
God.
tough.
But
That
you
was,
made it through.
I made it through. I made it through that.
What is
And
the best thing? I know a lot of people are so afraid when someone dies, they don't know what to say. And so a lot of people say nothing at all, which is fine. Or they leave because they don't want to face you. And I
right,
often tell people that is the last thing to do. Show up. And if you have to, just show up and be silent. But let them
yeah,
see that you are there. Can
right.
you remember any 1 or 2 things that someone said that was just like, that was just the right thing to say? And it really touched you. Anybody?
Yes, I would say about a year before he passed, a friend of mine who's actually a teacher at the school had miscarried, and I went to visit with her and sat on her couch and hugged her and talked to her and we prayed together. And it was really tough for her. And then when Michael passed, she showed up at my house and sat on my couch and hugged me and said, all I wanted was for someone to hug me, and that's what I'm going to do for you. And that was perfect. That was perfect. And I will never, ever forget that, ever forget that. She was giving back to me what I had given to her. And of course, that was God at work again.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was the most perfect moment, I think, honestly.
This whole story is about faith and survival. And you had two humans to guide. And you and I, as Catholic wives and mothers, realize that it's just so much bigger than just being a mom, just getting our kids through. This is about
Oh,
getting
yeah.
our kids closer to God.
Yeah.
How did any of these miraculous things that you went through, these stories, these survival, how did it help your children? How did it help you help your children? How did they survive and how are they today because of this? I
Mhm.
mean, daddy was a warrior, so they had survival built into them.
Right. Well, I would pray with them every night before we went to bed. For a while, they didn't leave my sight, which is normal. Fearful that something will happen to the other parent. So that was something I remember. Thought this is new. Them not wanting to, always worried about my safety, worried about how I was doing. Um, and so we would pray together every night. Um, I would tell them that I remember one night in particular, we were all sitting on my bed and we were talking before we would all lay down and go to sleep. And I said, listen, you may not be able to see your daddy, but he can hear you. So let's tell daddy good night. And so let's all yell, hey, daddy, we love you. Good night. And that made them feel so good. And
Yeah.
I'll never forget that. And they yelled, daddy, good night. We love you. We love you. And I said, he hears you. He hears you. Um, so just praying together. I would also go up to the school, and if they were having a rough day or something or anxiety, the teachers would allow me to sit outside the classroom and just read a book. And if they got nervous or something, they could come out and say, oh, they're okay, you're right, you're still here, and then go back in the classroom, just always kind of knowing that I'm there. um, our church family really um, took care of us and helped us a lot. um, So basically just praying with my kids and letting them know that their daddy can still hear them, still going to church together, letting my son know it's okay to cry, and it's not your job to take over your daddy's spot, even though, I mean, you're 11 years old. Let's not worry about those things. Mommy's got it. I've got this. Um, and just always being there for them, always being available, always being there for them. And uh, eventually, Justin graduated Catholic High here in Little Rock and went to West Point. He went to West Point, uh, graduated and did really well. So I'm super proud of him for that. And then Meredith has one more year of college, and she wants to help children with trauma. So
Wow.
that's,
What a
yeah.
blessing.
Mhm.
What a blessing. Let me ask you, I am sure in this day and age when so few people practice faith,
Mhm.
you were not the majority. Michael was not the majority on that plane, and there were other grieving widows who didn't know the Lord. Have you connected with them, and how did your faith and your survival help their faith and survival?
I volunteer right now for TAPS. It's called Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. That's in DC. And I first got associated with them right after, I would say like in 2009, when I decided to take myself and my two kids to a good grief camp. And that was for the widows and widowers and their kids. And the volunteers are all military men that give up their Memorial Weekend to help out. So the children are being taken care of by the military people, and then we get to go to workshops and stuff and be around other widows and widowers and figure out how to do this or get help or be around others that are like us. So after a while, I've a few years, I felt well enough to help others. So I got trained to do that. And now for, I would say 11 years, TAPS will call me and say, we have a military wife whose husband was just killed. Can you take this case? We'll send the case to you, can read over it. And then I will contact that wife or that husband and just start a conversation And they feel, I try to make them feel safe. And I think they do right off the bat, knowing that I
You
do
know their
understand.
pain.
Yeah. And they do try to put me with people who have lost their loved ones kind of in a similar fashion. And so like I just got a survivor about her husband passed 6 months ago, kind of in a similar way. And so that really helps a lot. But there's just kind of they feel safe. There's an understanding, and then also kind of a silent language that you share, I always say. You don't always have to say too much to understand what the other one's trying to express. So, and they can talk to me as little or as often as they want. I always try to be available. Some of them want to speak 2 times a week, some maybe every other week, something like that. But I always check in on them, see how they're doing. And always try to, when they want to talk, accommodate them. So that also helps me heal.
Yeah. But were
Yeah.
there any women on your husband's helicopter? Were they all men, or were there women that died too?
There was one woman on the
Okay.
helicopter.
So for all of these women, the one man that's grieving, were any of them that you were, and I guess that's a private question, because I guess we can seek down, it's too few of people, but I don't want anyone to go and search them out. But again, anyone there that was like, how are you surviving? And I don't believe in God, but was your faith able to help someone believe in God?
Yes.
That's,
A lot of people in this situation, and I've seen it, get angry at God. And this brings back a memory. I was being Father West with me to be on a radio station to talk about what had happened. And the disc jockey was asking me, well, didn't you get angry at God? Weren't you angry at him at all? And I was like, no, not even one, just really pressuring me. And I said, no, why would I do that? Why would I be angry at God? And also Michael's with him. Why would I do that?
yeah.
But people just assume that, yeah. And a lot of people do. And unfortunately, some people never get back, which is sad to me. But yeah, I always try to share that, to let them know that listen, I've been there and I understand, but God got me through it. Just give it a chance. Just give it a little bit of a chance. So, yeah.
So you said that some miracles took place beforehand, but then you told me there have actually been some miracles that took place after this. God has really been, he plucked you out, man. And he's just like, I'm going to keep showing you, So would you mind sharing any of the post-trauma miracles?
Yeah. Just a lot of, I did want to share one thing, before, if I can.
Oh, of course.
Before the funeral, Father West wanted me to go into the church, and
And you keep
and
mentioning Father West. Was this your Catholic
this was my
pastor, or
Catholic
was this
priest.
the military priest on the
This
base?
was our Catholic church priest.
So he
And
was not the military assigned priest. Okay.
yeah. So he said, I really would like, if you want to read what I'm going to say at the funeral tomorrow, I'll let you go in the church and you can sit in there quietly and privately, and I'll lock the church up and no one will be able to get in there and bother you. He said, I'll go in the church office, I'll give you my phone, and after you read it, just give me a little text and I'll come and get you. Just read it quietly and let me know what you think. And so I said, okay. So I was sitting there reading it, and then I looked up and I felt like Michael was behind me, in the pew behind me. And I thought, oh, okay. So I was crying a little bit reading it because it's such beautiful homily and everything. And then I got up and I walked in front of the altar and then took a right and kneeled in front of the Blessed Mary statue to pray. And I felt like he was behind me. But I just was still kind of in day, just accepting it. Okay, this is happening. This is real. Okay. So then I go back after I'm kneeling and I sit back down in the pew. And then Father West comes barreling through the door. Are you okay? Is everything okay? I'm like, what do you mean, Father? And I was just getting ready to call him to come get me. He said, was there someone in here? And I said, no, Father, I'm right here in the front. I can see if anybody got in or anything. he told me, and he said he had witnesses while he was in the church offices. There were cameras, and he was keeping an eye on everything to make sure no one got in there. And he said that he saw a man in uniform behind me, walking behind me. And I hadn't said anything to him about Michael. And I said, Father, I felt Michael. I said, I felt him behind me and then walk behind me. He said, yes. He said, I saw this man walking behind you. And he said, and it's like he thought I might not believe him. He said, I promise you, there were people in the office, they heard me jump up out of my chair and go, oh my goodness, there's someone in the church, you know? And I said, that was, and we both looked at each other like we both just experienced a beautiful supernatural gift from heaven.
Wow. And I'm sure they don't record those things. And even if they had,
course,
you look back at the tape, it wouldn't be in there.
Yeah, the even in the women in the office are like, yes, he jumped out of his chair, and we thought, oh my goodness, what is going on? And yeah, and
Wow.
so
Wow.
a lot of confirmation going on, a lot of, yes, that is what I felt, and things like that.
So the funny thing is, you know, God's given you all these blessings, all these miracles, all these things, and yet, the whole point of all of this is detachment.
Yes,
Detach from the ways of the world, detach from
yes,
other thoughts, detach from your material things, detach
yes,
from your spouse,
yes,
detach from your children, because the only thing we need to be attached to is God. And as much as it may sound like detaching from these people that you love is going to be painful, it's actually the opposite, because I'm detaching from things that I can't hold on to, that were never mine in the beginning. They were only on loan to me, and
right,
attached to to the giver, to the creator.
yes,
And
yes,
that's what I keep hearing from you.
right. Everything he gives us, everything that we have, he has given to us.
Yeah.
And I tell people, don't ever take anything for granted, because it can be gone tomorrow. It can be all,
Mhm.
don't ever say that that won't happen to me, or that would never happen, but because it could. But everything that we have belongs to God. And I remind myself that all the time. Just don't take anything for granted at all. Don't, you know, I still look at my children and look at their eyes and look at the crinkle when they smile and how they walk in a room. And I feel so blessed with the home that we have and my family, and that everyone's well and no one's in the hospital, and you know, that we all get along and that we all love each other, and that I have such a wonderful priest now since Father West is gone, and we have a beautiful church to go to, and that we have food on the table, and
And a precious 1-year-old that kind
that
of
a
entered your
precious baby
life.
that's healthy and happy and likes to come here and visit with me. And um if we could just simplify more, just simplify, and actually talk face to face, spend time with one another, invest in your friendships, um make time for that person, show them that you care, even if you just show up for 30 minutes. Or, you know, like the other day, if a friend calls and says, can you go to mass with me? Yeah, I can squeeze that in. Yes, I'll be there with you. Are you having a hard day?
Yeah.
Just be there for each other and talk and listen and love, and you know, just, this world is really crazy right now. And our home should be our sanctuary. It
Yeah.
should be our sanctuary. It should be where our family wants to spend time together, and where we find peace. And, um, you know, also belonging to a good church where you feel that that's your other family, and that you feel comfortable there and don't feel judged, and you feel some connection with your priest. And it's just, things really need to be simplified. And there's such joy in things being that way.
Yeah.
I mean, why not find joy in, you know, washing the clothes, or sweeping the floor, or taking care of your grandbaby, or just being outside, enjoying nature. Um, just the simple things are what's really, and you can hear God so much better, so much better when it's quieter.
You know, for Lent, in
Got
addition
that.
to giving up sweets, I gave up my cell phone every day until
There you
noon.
go.
And what I've said to people is, you know how when you eat clean, your body feels different? You're like, oh my gosh. Within a
Yeah.
day of giving up my phone that early in the morning, my mind, my outlook felt clean. I feel like I re-engaged into the world. And for Lent, we do things so that hopefully it can become a good habit. And so I am planning on, to a certain degree, not looking at texts or anything in my phone um, until I have to, because I am more engaged because I've given it up and I go places. And
Yeah.
I'll be in the doctor's office, or I just had a tire repaired and I watched every single person stick their face in their phone, and I couldn't, so I didn't. But I
Yeah.
observed life again. I
You
saw
do.
buildings when we drove down the street. I see things. We don't realize what we've lost, and you've lost so much more, but yet you've
Mhm.
gained at
Mhm.
least as much back in return.
Absolutely.
You've written a book about all of this. And I want to make sure everybody knows. I want to make sure you share this video with everybody because this story is so powerful. But
Yeah.
you can get Wendy Taylor's book. And again, it's called Undefeated, a
I'll
war
hold it up
widow's.
if you'd like.
Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah,
A
there we
war
go.
widow's story of faith and survival. And you can get that. You can get it on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, but I'd rather you go to her website. It's called privatesorrow.com, and you can get the book. You can listen to her talking, speaking engagements, hire her, bring her in. I think you guys should do that, because if you're as good a writer as you are a speaker, I mean, this book should have sold 1 million copies already, but I would like to do my part in helping to promote it, to
Sure.
heal others. What was the whole point of writing the book? Was it just to heal people, bring them to the faith, just to, puke out all of these hard feelings or sorrow? Why'd you write it?
God told me to, and I was resistant because I didn't want to relive everything.
Yeah.
And he nudged me to do it. And also I was like, I'm not a writer. I'm thinking, what? I've never wanted to be a writer. I never thought about being a writer. Nothing. And a friend of mine I told a friend of mine, she said, well, would you just take a little road trip with me real quick, just for the day, and meet this author, and let's have lunch with her and see. And I said, we're wasting her time. I don't we're wasting her time. She's gonna think I'm crazy. I don't know how to do this is not. She went, just try. I went, okay. So we went there and I talked to her, and she said, well, the way that you're talking and explaining things, I think you're a writer and you don't know it. I went, okay. She said, do me a favor and just start writing your story. Just write your feelings. Don't even worry about, the grammar or the way it's set up on the page. Just start writing all of your feelings. And then just send it to me. And let me just kind of look at it. I was like, oh my God. So I went home and said, okay, I'm just gonna be wasting her time again. She's just gonna look at it and think, what in the world? I said, okay, I'll do it. So I did it. And she got a hold of me a couple of days after she'd gotten the packet, and she said, well, a group of us were looking at it and we didn't make any corrections because we were so stunned about what we read. And she said, I really think you should do this. And I went, what? She said, yes, let's just continue doing this. And I went, okay. And so that's how it started.
And
So
here's
God
Jesus going, the
surprised me.
next time I tell you to do something.
Yeah, I thought, am I hearing this right? So I said, God, okay, I will do this, and I will be completely honest. It will not be sugar coated. It will not be pretty. I will be very raw and honest, because that's the only way I can help anyone, is if I tell the truth. So that's how it happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
Do you speak on
And
the
it took
book?
me about 2 years. It took me about 2 years to do it. And then I ended up cutting it in half, because I remembered how when you're grieving really hard, your attention span is very short. So I just made sure that each page was special and short enough for someone who was grieving to hopefully read. And that's how it all happened.
Who's your biggest audience? Have you found that it's other grieving people, or it's really much everybody who supports military, or is it
It is
Catholics,
a lot of
Christian?
widowers and stuff. But the thing that surprised me, um, veterans and parents of suicide, like if their child committed suicide, or
What do
suicide
they
survivor.
say to you?
that the things I wrote in there remind them of a lot of the feelings that they were having. So I didn't even think about that. I'm
Mm.
reaching a larger audience than I realized I would.
Well, God thought about that.
He sure did.
That's why he
He
told
sure
you to write
did.
the darn book.
He did.
Oh my
So that
goodness.
was good to hear. Not that I want those things to happen, but I didn't even think about it.
No, but
I
we're
was
in a broken world and those things do happen.
Yeah.
But they do happen, and you're able to take your pain and grief and make it into something beautiful for someone who just doesn't have the strength that you have or the faith.
It's all God.
It is all God. What do you think
Really.
Michael would say about all this?
I think he would say, "Good job, honey." I think that's what he would say. Good job, and keep going. I think he would say, "Keep going." Yeah, I
Yeah.
think that's what he would say.
Name one thing you'd have our viewers do differently as a result of something they heard today.
Be aware of how fragile each one of our lives are. Just please be aware that it can be gone tomorrow. Appreciate every single one of your loved ones, and always say, "I love you." Always leave on good terms, and always make sure your loved ones know how much they mean to you. It's very important.
And
And
one
also,
last. Oh, go ahead. Keep going.
and also your children.
Yeah.
Let
Oh.
them know. Yeah.
So and it's a fill in the blank, but when I die, I will know my life has been a success if
My children are happy and close to God.
yeah.
Mhm. My children's happiness is everything to me. Yeah.
Yeah. My children's salvation. Yeah,
Yes.
is everything. Happiness comes with it.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, I hope all of you watching have been as touched as I have been, and I want each of you to get a copy of this book. If you could hold it up again, it's called Undefeated, A War Widow's Story of Faith and Survival. You can get it on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, but go instead to her website where you can get so much more. Go to privatesorrow.com. There is a link to that website right here in the show notes, so just go click down below and you can get a copy of the book and get it to anybody that you know who's lost a loved one to suicide or lost a loved one in the war or a veteran or just anybody who wants to read a good story with, empathy and compassion. I also would like to tell you again, share this show with people because then sometimes they, have the attention span of a gnat and they'd rather watch it than they'd rather read it. So share this with your friends and family and go ahead and subscribe to my newsletter at my website, breakfastwithbacon.com. You will learn about guests like Wendy and the shows that we've done. You'll also learn about the conference, for instance, that we're doing in October, which is the Disrupting the Culture with Truth Conference. We have the best Catholic speakers coming in. Well, I say that every year because we have amazing Catholic speakers coming in. Father Chris Alar, Christine Watkins, Daniel O'Connor, Mark Mallet, and myself will be speaking this year. And we're going to have a musical performance as well. But for that, go to truthspeakers.org. But there's also a link to that below here as well. So like me on Instagram and Facebook and Rumble, and of course here. And I think that's it. Anything important that you think I forgot to say, Wendy?
No, I think you covered
I think
it.
I got it covered, right? Oh my goodness.
So I think so.
Well, you have been such a blessing to have on the show, and your story just touches me, and I'm sure it touches so many people. Thank you for listening to the voice of God. Thank you for
Thank you so
being
much for having me.
faithful. No, thank you for being faithful. May we be up there together one day, and we'll have won many souls for Christ based on obedience. So
We
I'm
will.
sure you are, for sure.
Thank
Right.
you.
So you know how we end the show. So we're going to
Yeah.
test her. I am Dr. Christine Bacon, and I want to thank you all for watching Breakfast with Bacon. And I'd like to remind you to live your life
Sunny side up.